Hey everybody, it's Rachel. Welcome back to the channel. If you saw my recent video on stupidity, you know that I have been thinking about the strange ways that people interact with knowledge, facts, and common sense. It seems like anymore, knowing too much is optional or overrated, and asking questions is practically an act of rebellion these days. But this topic feels a little bit darker, a little more intentional. It's willful ignorance. It's not just about being unaware. It's about actively choosing not to know. And the more I see it creeping into everyday life in 2025, the more it scares the crap out of me. Willful ignorance can be like putting on blinders to the world. On one hand, it might feel like it helps you get through the day, keep the peace, or avoid discomfort. But on the other hand, it can also be a way to maintain control. Refusing to acknowledge facts because facing them might mean admitting you were wrong or you made a mistake. This isn't just about being uninformed or misled. It's about choosing not to know, choosing not to look. And while some people do it out of defiance because facing the truth might mean admitting they were wrong, others do it to avoid the overwhelm, to protect their peace. We're not just dealing with a lack of information anymore. We are dealing with a choice not to know. And I'm not sure that's a good thing these days. Either way, the result is the same. Truth gets buried and we all pay the price. So let's talk about it. If you've watched me much, you know that my channel is pretty random. I cover trying to live your healthiest, happiest life in the simplest ways possible. And I talk about whatever random thing is living rent-free in my head in a given week. For some of you who are here because of my stupidity video, that might not be okay. Some of my topics might not be of interest to you, but everything I talk about is centered around keeping yourself happy and healthy when life is crap. And let's be honest, a lot of us are feeling the crap right now. That's why this topic is relevant in my eyes, because how we engage with truth, facts, and reality deeply affects our stress levels, our mental clarity, and ultimately our overall well-being. Willful ignorance isn't just not knowing something, it's choosing not to know. It's an active decision to avoid reality, even when we're presented with undeniable truths. Now, this can come from two places, one more harmful than the other, but both still dangerous. On one hand, it can come from a place of pride or stubbornness, a refusal to admit that we were wrong, we made a poor choice, or didn't know something we should have. This kind of ignorance often means changing something that we're deeply attached to, how we eat, how we move, the media we consume, how we vote, who we support, how we treat others. For some, admitting they were wrong is just too painful. It is easier to double down and keep telling ourselves the lie, even when it's hurting us and those around us. That's where willful ignorance becomes a more manipulative force. It's a shield for the ego, protecting us from the discomfort of being wrong. On the other hand, there's a more human side to it. People sometimes choose ignorance as a way of avoiding the overwhelming stress of facing hard truths. Life is tough, and the truth can feel like a mountain too steep to climb. So we stick our heads in the sand. We bury ourselves in distractions. We convince ourselves that if we just don't look too hard, we'll be able to maintain our peace. But that peace is just an illusion, and it's a dangerous one, because avoiding reality doesn't solve the problem. It just makes it worse. The longer we pretend it's not there, the harder it becomes to address. So whether it's pride or protection, willful ignorance feeds on our fear, and it's a fear that's deeply tied to our stress levels. When we refuse to face facts, whether because of an ego or a desperate need for comfort, we create an environment where stress thrives. That's why this isn't just about being clueless. It's about actively choosing to stay that way, even when the stakes are high. And in today's world, it's on the rise. You can see it in the spread of flat-out false narratives online, the rejection of scientific consensus, or the way people double down on clearly debunked claims just because it fits their narrative. From public health to politics or climate change, the trend is noticeable, and it's kind of dangerous in my opinion. Let's break this down and talk about why this is happening. Why are people leaning into willful ignorance right now? Well, first, there's information overload. People are overwhelmed. There's too much to process, too many conflicting narratives, and everyone is shouting. In the chaos, some folks just shut down and pick a lane, and they stay there, even if that lane is built on lies. It's easier than trying to sift through all the noise. And let's not forget about the internet echo chamber. We're all victims of it in some form. You can now curate your entire feed to tell you what you already believe over and over and over again. No friction, no challenge, just a cozy little blanket of confirmation bias. Think about it. On YouTube, for example, you watch a few videos on a specific topic and suddenly your feed starts filling up with more of the same, reinforcing your beliefs and ideas. Anything that doesn't match your view, you're less likely to see it and even less likely to engage with it. That makes it easier to stay stuck in your own narrative without ever having to face opposing viewpoints. And the internet makes this even easier. Echo chambers make it simple to shut out anything that challenges you and stay surrounded by only the voices that validate your view. It's not just human nature anymore. It's reinforced by the algorithm. And that leads us to tribal thinking. It's easier to stick with your group than to challenge the herd. People want to belong, even if it means ignoring obvious truths, because being right doesn't always feel as good as being accepted. And in today's world, where social media can turn a disagreement into a public shaming within minutes, a lot of people would rather just go along with the group. And sometimes that need to belong puts people on the wrong side of history, but they go along with it anyway, because the fear of being excluded, criticized, or different can be stronger than the drive to do what's right. It starts young, think back to school. How many times did you stay quiet or go along with something you didn't agree with just to avoid being the weird one or the outcast? That doesn't magically go away in adulthood. It just gets more dangerous. History is full of examples: segregation, fascism, the witch trials, where entire communities went along with something unjust or irrational just because it was easier to stay in the group than to stand alone. Then there's discomfort avoidance. Sometimes knowing the truth means we'd have to do something about it. We'd have to change how we eat, how we live, how we vote, how we treat people. And frankly, that's exhausting. So instead, people stick their heads in the sand and call it self-care. Don't get me wrong, I am all about protecting your mental peace, but there's a difference between actively managing your stress and pretending stress doesn't exist at all. If you keep avoiding hard truths, it doesn't make them go away. In fact, it can make things worse in the long run. Growth and change require discomfort. We don't have to live in constant stress, but we do have to be willing to face things if we want to move forward. And finally, there's trust breakdown. Look, I get it. Institutions have failed us. Governments, media, healthcare. People don't know who to trust anymore. But when that distrust turns into I trust nothing and no one, you're left floating in chaos. And that's not freedom. That's paralysis. But what I'm seeing more and more is people abandoning all the traditional sources of information only to latch onto one person or one influencer or one fringe source and follow them without question because they sound like they care. They say they're fighting for the truth or freedom or the people, and we want to believe that, especially when we're tired or scared or disillusioned. But just because someone says they have your best interests at heart, it doesn't mean they do. Some of them don't give a crap about your health, your future, or your well-being. They care about clicks, control, power, or just being right. This is where critical thinking matters more than ever. It doesn't mean you blindly trust everything, and it doesn't mean you blindly reject everything either. It means you pause, ask questions, and weigh evidence. It means you think for yourself. And look, I know someone is out there thinking, well, Rachel, what about you? You're on YouTube, you just want views. Yeah, Sherlock, I do want people to watch. That's kind of the point of posting videos, but I'm not selling fear or hope in a bottle or pretending I've got all the answers. I am sharing what I've lived, what I've learned, what I know, and what I keep questioning, because that's how we grow. I don't need to be right. I just want to be real and maybe offer a little clarity and sanity. You take it for what it's worth. Now, let's talk about what this actually does to people, because this is where it ties into everything I care about on this channel. Our health, our well-being, our sense of peace. Willful ignorance isn't harmless. It leads to stress, confusion, divisiveness. People aren't grounded. They're reactive, anxious, and constantly triggered. And half the time, it's because they're operating from bad information or flat out denial. It leads to poor choices, with our health, our relationships, our finances. When you refuse to look at the truth, you can't make good decisions. You're just reacting to whatever makes you feel safe or righteous in the moment. And emotionally, it creates stagnation. You can't grow if you won't face the truth. You can't heal if you won't name what's broken. And that's why I talk about things like this, even if it's not the most popular topic, because it matters. This channel has always been about health and happiness in the real world, not the filtered surface level version. Speaking up, asking questions, refusing to play along with willful ignorance. It's not just good for society, it's good for your mental health. When we stop swallowing things just to keep the peace and actually speak from integrity, our stress levels go down. That bottled up pressure, it releases. And curiosity, real curiosity, is a form of self-care. It keeps us sharp, alive, human. From where I sit, willful ignorance feels like a slow erosion of sanity. I see people exhausted by their own denial, but still clinging to it because the alternative means sitting with uncomfortable truths, and we've created a world that's allergic to discomfort. I'm not saying we have to know everything or be perfect. I'm not saying we should blindly trust every source of authority, but we have to stay open, curious, willing to admit when we don't know something, and humble enough to learn. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I've been there. I've ignored things I didn't want to face. I've believed people who didn't have my best interests at heart. And I'm sure I'll do it again. We all fall into it sometimes. The key is recognizing when it happens, calling it what it is, and doing better. No shame, just awareness. And that's why I felt like this topic needed to be a follow-up on my video on stupidity. That one was a little bit lighter, This one feels a little heavier because it isn't just about being clueless. It's about choosing to stay clueless. And the more I see it in 2025, the more I know we have to talk about it out loud. Truth is not the enemy, It's the path out of the noise. And at the end of the day, we, the regular people, the nobodies, are the ones who have to stand up for each other, for what's right in the world. Because when we stay silent or disconnected, the noise wins. But when we stand together with clarity, courage, and curiosity, we remind each other that we're not alone, and that still matters a lot. So let's be the weird ones who want to know more. Let's keep asking questions and pull our heads out of the sand, even when it's messy and a little stressful, because there is power in knowledge. Okay, that's all I've got to say about that. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. As always, take care of you, and I will see you the next time. Bye-bye.